let's preview a different position group day by day all week. We'll wrap it up at the end of the week with quarterbacks. We got tight ends on Thursday, wide receivers tomorrow. We did running backs yesterday, and you're going, well, where else can we go, Chris? Well, the ones you wait until the last 2 picks of the draft for every year, defense and special teams, and that kicker spot, Corey. Now, this could also be a discussion of whether we really think kickoffs are going to be so vastly different that there might be some kind of value put on the return game, but then it's also equally difficult to try and handicap teams' special teams value or defense and special teams value based only on that as well.
Let's start and attack the kickoff thing first because depending on your league rules, and make sure that should be really the first thing you do when you get an invite to a league, is check the rules and get the settings right and make sure that you are drafting accordingly for the rules of that league. Now, if they allow you to get points from kick returners, then I would look at a guy like the Dallas Cowboys, Kevontae Turpin, because really you're trying not to really accumulate yards. You're trying to get someone that can hit a home run. And with this new style, he is somebody that identifies as a home run hitter in the kickoff game. Now, when we go to DSTs, there's no real way to handicap it going year after year. But what we could do is the best predictor of the future is the past. Last year, scoring 178 fantasy points in most standard style leagues was the Dallas Cowboy defense. Obviously, they had 17 interceptions. They forced 14 fumbles, and they had 6 defensive touchdowns, 46 sacks as well. So really, with Dallas, you saw that Deron Bland and those 6 pick sixes, and the fact that Al Harris' defense, like the jump routes, makes them one of the defenses that is good for fantasy because they can create a lot of turnovers and turn them into touchdowns. Right behind that, you had the Baltimore Ravens, Chris, who had a lot of sacks last year. Their defense accumulated 60 sacks. They picked off the ball 18 times, forced 16 fumbles, and recovered 13. So really, it's the opportunistic defenses that really can give you the most upside with those last couple of picks of your fantasy draft. After that is the Buffalo Bills, another team, 18 interceptions, 12 forced fumbles, 12 fumble recoveries, only 2 defensive touchdowns. When you look at the teams that scored the most defensive touchdowns, it was the Cowboys, which we talked about, and then you have the Las Vegas Raiders. One of the things I like about the Raiders and their defense is, Chris, they have a havoc player, a player who can create havoc, and Max Crosby, who can really change a game from a defensive standpoint. The Cowboys have that in Micah Parsons as well, but that's only when they play the Commanders and the New York Giants. The Dolphins as well, 4 touchdowns on defense. Indianapolis Colts, 4 touchdowns on defense as well. And what you see with those 2 units as well is also big interception, big forced fumble numbers. The most interceptions last year, the San Francisco 49ers, they only scored 1 defensive touchdown. The Chicago Bears also had 22 interceptions last year, only 2 defensive touchdowns. And the Bears don't really get much sacks. So really, when you're looking to fantasy defenses, you really want to focus on teams that can turn the ball over, like we've been able to see for years now with the Cowboys, the Ravens, teams that can score touchdowns. Mentioned Dallas, Las Vegas, a havoc player with a player like Crosby. The Miami Dolphins also create a lot of turnovers as well. And then you got the teams that are best on their defensive line when it comes to racking up sacks. Teams like the Baltimore Ravens, the Kansas City Chiefs, also teams with havoc creating players on the defensive side of the ball as well. So you look at the defenses that's going to get slept on, right? Like the Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills, the Indianapolis Colts, also the New York Jets, even the Buccaneers, 48 sacks last year, 18 forced fumbles. So you want to be able to go after those defenses that we've seen in the past have the ability to have havoc-creating players, guys like Micah Parsons, Max Crosby, Myles Garrett, and then, Roquan Smith, put him in that mix too, and Kyle Hamilton. When we talk Defensive Player of the Year a little bit later on, he's a name that should be in there. A guy like Chris Wilson, a guy who can get in the paint and disrupt the quarterback. Not only can that lead to sacks, that also can lead to turnovers. So that's kind of how you want to attack the DST position in your upcoming fantasy drafts.
Kicker, another spot where you'd probably keep an eye on Baltimore because of Justin Tucker. The Chiefs just signed Harrison Butker yesterday for what it's worth to a contract that makes him the league's highest paid kicker, 4 years, almost $26 million, almost 18 guaranteed. But Tucker, going to be one of those guys, Corey, that can hit from distance and not miss very often. And Harbaugh has no problem, John Harbaugh, getting his team into field goal range and then taking advantage of the points.
Yeah, and one of the things is he finished second, Justin Tucker, last year, the GOAT kicker, a Hall of Fame kicker, finished second last year in fantasy points for kickers with 160 total points and 9.4 fantasy points per game. And really, he racks up in that 30 to 50 yard range, hit 21 field goals in that range, extra points there as well. Brandon Aubrey, the kicker of the Dallas Cowboys, was the top fantasy kicker last year with 181 fantasy points. We saw him hit 10 field goals of 50 plus yards last year. Now, if you get points depending on the length of the field goal, the 50 plus yard guys are Brandon Aubrey in Dallas, Matt Prater in Arizona, Matt Gay with the Colts, Dustin Hopkins with Cleveland. And then you get other guys coming in there as well, like Cairo Santos, Jake Elliott's, Cameron Dicker, the kicker, Evan McPherson. So those are some of the guys. As far as the attempt goes, it's Jason Myers in Seattle. It's Matt Gay. And then you got Brandon Aubrey, Cairo Santos, Greg Zuerlein. Another way that I try to look at kicker, right, Chris, is you may want to match your quarterback and your kicker. I like to score a touchdown, so I don't want the drive to stall. But if the drive does stall, if you match the quarterback and the kicker, you can get some points there. Also, to avoid having to swap out kickers on bye weeks, look for the teams with the latest buys and take the kicker from that team. So this way, you can run your run kicker all the way up to week 14. At no point, even if you have Justin Tucker, at no point during the season do you want to be carrying two kickers. You're going to need those roster spots for running backs and wide receivers and stuff like that. Also, some people like to look at dome kickers so you don't have to deal with outside in the weather when it gets later into the season. So that's a couple of the ways you can look at kicker. But I'll be 100% honest with you. The best way to look at a kicker is to eliminate them from fantasy football altogether. I think a kickerless fantasy football league is the way to go. Just get the kickers and the random luck that happens with the kickers out of your fantasy league. Go with a DST, and I personally am anti-kicker.